Hi everyone, and welcome to the first session of this year's CChem conference, all about how to write your CChem statements. Just to remind you all that we are recording this event, and the recording will be made available after the event, and we will let you know so you can view that, and the recording will also appear on the Royal Society of Chemistry members area for those of you that want to view it afterwards as you make a start on your Chartered Chemist application. We've got two other sessions as part of this series in a week's time, and then another week after that. And the other sessions will be looking at how to evidence your CChem attributes in your portfolio. And the third session will be all about using the RSC to develop yourself as a CChem applicant, as well as afterwards when you've gained CChem. But let's go back to this first session. I'm joined today by a number of guest speakers and some fellow staff members in the chartership team at the RSC. So we'll do some brief introductions around the room before we make a start on the slides. So joining me from the chartership team is my colleague, Kim Smith. Let me give a wave, Kim, so everyone sees you there.
Hi, everyone.
Lovely. And also supporting the event today is my colleague, Louise Grover. Lovely. Also joining us today are two speakers who we'll hear from later on in the event. First up, we have Dr. Mike Edmondson, who's from the UK National Nuclear Laboratory, and then later on in the event we'll hear from a recent CChem awardee, Hannah Hudd, who is joining on the call. So we'll make a start now. So first up, we have some opening remarks. I forgot to mention. We have the chat function. It's either at the top or on the bottom, depending on how this is set up. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat there, or put them in the Q&A button box, which is next door to it as we go along. We also have a digital delegate bag that my colleague Louise will put in the chat for you. Thank you, Louise. And you can have a look on there. It has all the slides from all the different sessions, speaker bios, and also another column for you to add any questions that we can respond to. You will have access to the digital delegate bag after the event, as long as you've kept a hold of that link somewhere. So perhaps copy and paste it somewhere useful. So let's make a start then on writing your chartership statements. And to kick the whole thing off, we will hear first from Mike Edmondson. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Nellie. I love the idea of having a digital bag. I'm just wondering how you get one of those digital bugs that you used to get from the RSC into the digital bag. But I should focus on the matter in hand for now. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Nellie's already said, I work for the UK National Nuclear Lab. So I'm going to give a perspective in my role working for them, where I'm the senior coordinator for our accredited scheme with the RSC, but I also sit on the Admissions Committee for the RSC as well. So I can wear a number of hats in this conversation. So hopefully we'll say a few things that will be useful to you. So NNL is the UK's national lab for nuclear fission. We have a purpose that is nuclear science for the benefit of society. It's very much based in science and in engineering, and so professionalism and competence of our employees is centre to our success as an organisation. So the development of the resources that we have, the people within the organisation, is absolutely crucial to who we are. So it's no wonder that chemical sciences are a core component of that, and making sure that our chemists are trained and qualified is core to what we do. So Nelly, can we move on to the next slide? Thank you. For NNL, we as I've already said, it's core to what we do, and it's a way of us making sure that our staff are recognised for their professionalism, and it's also a key metric for the business. So we can measure as a business how we are doing, but it's also important for the individuals that are attaining chartership as well. It demonstrates that they've reached a certain point in their career, and it also demonstrates how they interact with others, how competent they are as a chemist, etc. But there's also benefits in terms of what you get from the RSC as well, things like networking, some of the access to journals, and a huge number of other things, which hopefully most of you are already aware of, but if not, I'm sure it's all on the RSC website. So next slide, please. So Nelly also asked me to give a perspective on AI. It's a very topical area at the moment, and before everybody joined us, we were talking about Hannah, talking to Hannah, and she was saying that she's only just done hers, and even 12 months on, it's much more relevant now than it even was then. So it is quite pertinent to talk about it at the moment. So when I was asked to do it, I thought, well, how am I going to do this? And good flicking, Nelly. And so I got AI to generate the slides for me. The next two slides are written, well, copied and pasted out of Copilot into here. I haven't altered the words. I've just pasted them into PowerPoint. And so what I want to demonstrate is that AI has become pervasive in a very short space of time. I'll be surprised if anybody on the call hasn't interacted with it in some way or another, and I expect its influence to grow. So we can't ignore it. We can't pretend it's not there and just don't use it, because it's going to start interacting with all parts of our lives. I'm not sure if the RSC are using it yet, in terms of how they assess the application come in, but it's pretty likely that it will start to be used by organisations like RSC going forward, just to streamline and simplify the application processes. And there's no doubt that the tools themselves can be used to improve the quality of submissions, whether that's spelling or grammar, even vocabulary, and it's particularly helpful for candidates that have conditions like dyslexia, where it can really help. What it's very good at is providing a skeleton of what you might want to say, just as I've done on these slides, so that hopefully you can see that I'm kind of coarsely following what the slides are saying. But where it does start to fall apart is if it's not your words, is it really your submission? In this slide, the personalized guidance and feedback it is written in a very positive way, but in my experience, it's easy and obvious, to be honest, to see where somebody has used AI without any further thought. Those submissions at first seem great, they tick all the boxes that the question asks, and they quite often use quite eloquent wording. but when you really start to read it, you find that there's a lack of richness in there. There's no lived experience. They're quite bland and non-personal. So you start to be able to pick them out quite easily. So what you can do is you can take that framework that you've been given and start to change it and add to it by putting in your own personal details, your personal perspective. Now you can do that by adding it into the AI, but at some point it gets to the point that you may as well have just written the answer anyway. So so I think it certainly has something to contribute, but don't think of it as a substitute for actually giving your evidence. So it's also been aware that that AI will be used, as I said, by the RSC and others to catch AI. So the whole field is developing. I think from a personal perspective, it's likely to be a net positive, but there will be pitfalls along the way. So make sure that you're driving the AI and the AI is not driving you. Now, Nellie and I were talking about this yesterday. So Nellie, if you go to the next slide, I had the perfect example come through on WhatsApp yesterday. So I've got a friend called Graham, who is recently retired. So he has got time on his hands and he's been typing his own name into AI, ChatGTP or something similar, and he asked it what it knew about him, and it was pretty accurate to come up to start with. It started talking about how he works in the brewing industry, how he set up his own brewery and stuff. And yes, it is great to have a friend who owns a brewery, by the way. However, as you can see ringed in AI and his comment below, it also determined that he died in February. So I thought that was an interesting example to share. So moving on to next slide, please. The RSC do have a position on the use of AI. I'm not going to labour this slide by reading it all out, but it's there. I think largely if you listen to what I've said already, it kind of will guide you in the right way, and I think Nellie might say a few words on it later as well. So I think if you go to next slide again, I think what talking about AI has done has kind of set me up for and given an introduction into what I look for when I'm assessing CChem applications. So if you click the next one, I'm going to gradually go through these. So the first question I'll ask myself has the candidate actually answered the question? There's a number of attributes you've got to meet. Quite often I see answers that are sort of answer the question, but they're not really addressing what's there. There might be many paragraphs, but are they actually answering the question? So it's important to ask yourself as you once you've addressed it, have you answered the question? So next one. Next, is there enough depth in the answer? So I usually say to the candidates at NNL that we're looking for either one substantial answer where you've really spent time using this particular skill, this particular attribute over a prolonged period. Not everybody has those examples, so it could be a number of smaller examples of where you've used it in a number of different projects, but giving one answer of something where you used it for a week is probably not enough depth. So the next one is, have you done the work? A pitfall that we see quite often is candidates saying, we did this and we did that. What we want to know is, what did you do? What was your contribution to the example that you're giving? So think about, what did you do? No, that's fine, Nellie, thanks. Also, are you sort of leading the work? Are you involved in the direction of the work? Are you helping make the decisions? You might not be a director of a company setting strategy, but how are you contributing to how that work is evolving and going forward? Are you simply turning a handle, or are you involved in the chemistry and in the different aspects of the work that you're doing? So that's something else we're looking for. And then the final one is how are you using your experiences to develop your knowledge? You know, are you identifying where you need to do something else? That might be a training course. It might be just getting experience on something else that helps bolster your knowledge. So, I think those are kind of the nuggets that I can provide. I hope they're helpful. And with that, I'll hand back to Nellie.
Thanks, Mike. I think, yeah, lots of food for thought in terms of using AI. We have a bit more in the next set of slides on where to use it and where not to use it. And just looking at these questions from Mike as someone who makes the decisions on whether to award Chartered Chemist or not, they are also good questions to share with the audience today. I think the fourth one is the candidate simply following direction, or how are they applying their knowledge is definitely one to keep in mind. As chartership candidates, we're really looking for where those examples are operating at a higher level, where you are involved in more complex problem solving and bringing lots of good things to the table in terms of the work that you're involved with. So we don't really want examples where someone has just been following simple direction, but actually a bit more involvement than that to be at the chartership level. So thank you for sharing that and for opening the session. Next, we'll move on to some slides based on what the RSC are looking for and what we have out there in terms of guidance, and I'll be talking you through those slides. So if you have any questions again that come to mind as I'm talking, please pop them in the Q&A or in the chat, and someone will be able to respond to you as we're talking along, hopefully. So I am also part of the chartership team, and I work primarily with our accredited organisations. So through that, I see a lot of range of different chartership candidates and chartership applications coming through, as well as the team more broadly when supporting candidates not at accredited organisations. As a result of that, we've accrued over the years a wealth of knowledge, and I'm happy to be able to share some of those hints and tips that the team have sort of developed and come across over the years with you. We'll cover those as we get towards the end of this part, before we hear from Hannah about her experiences for CChem. So before we make a good start, we'll just have a little reminder on what the application for Chartered Chemist involves and what it's all about. So there are essentially two aspects to the chartership application. The first one is around the evidence that you provide in terms of the written statements. And for those of you on the webinar or listening afterwards that are from accredited organisations, this may also include an interview, and on occasion we may invite regular chartership candidates to an interview, but for the majority of you, the application is based on 14 written statements, and that's what the rest of these slides is all about. So the role of these written statements is the most important aspect of your Chartered Chemist application. And we're looking here for 2 to 3 examples per attribute. So there's a rough word limit of around 500 words. So within that, a few hundred on your first example, a couple of hundred on your second, and if you've got any left over, perhaps you want to submit a third example as you go along. And we don't really want members writing pages and pages per attribute, so it's roughly equivalent to half a page or so. And the role of the written statements, or your job in providing them, is to explain your conduct of how you went about the work that you are using then as evidence to show that you have met that attribute. And within that, you have to show your workings out in terms of give reasons for the decisions that you've made and explain the impact. And we have more advice on how to structure your statement a bit later on. On the other side of the book here, for your application, we've got the supporting evidence. So the statements is the most important thing, but then close second will be the supporting evidence, which is a combination of your primary evidence portfolio, which we'll cover in the second session of this series, and also mentor comments. So we're looking here for one or more pieces of supporting evidence. The minimum is one. You have a page limit, so it might be possible for you to show more than one piece of primary evidence, and that may be needed if you have a range of examples, for example. And lastly, but not least, your mentor comments along the way. And just signpost, if you go onto the digital delegate bag in the chat, there's the Padlet link, you'll find there a link to our main CChem website that has information about all of these things, and on our members area we've got more information for your mentors on what they need to provide in their mentor comments. So let's really have a good think about the role of the statements. They are the most important aspect of the submission, and it's a chance for you to tell your own personal story. So echoing what Mike said earlier, using tools like AI is great, but what we really need to see, and what the assessors really need to see, is how you as an individual work and operate, and what was behind your thinking on certain things. Why did you do this or that led to a great outcome? So it's really your personal story. I might say this more than once throughout the rest of the session. You are not a scientific experiment. So unlike the reports that you usually come across in your day-to-day roles, this is a little bit different. So you are not simply making the case that you should be awarded Chartered Chemist because you've submitted some great primary evidence. Actually, the assessors and the RSC really need to understand why you are great at doing your role, not that you simply are, but why and how. And it's through showing the why and the how that the assessors are able to come to hopefully a successful decision. So your statements explain how you meet the attributes. I've already covered that. The assessors aids their understanding. It also gives confidence to the assessors that you should be awarded a Chartered Chemist. They review the application holistically, and so they will be looking across all the 14 statements to understand if you're a bit weak in one area. Is there any supporting comment that you've provided or anything that you've written that they can apply, say, to that weaker attribute statement, for example? And on occasion, that does work in the candidate's favour. So your application is all about showing that you are the right sort of person in terms of advancing the chemical sciences, you're working at that higher level, and you really are an ambassador for the chemical sciences. So the assessors need to feel confident that you should be awarded Chartered Chemist status. I've said again that you're not a scientific experiment, so it's not a case of simply stating the facts, it's walking us through, almost like the assessors are on your shoulder as you're going about your day-to-day work. And last but not least, the attributes are about you and your impact. And echoing Mike's comment, try and use I instead of we if you really mean my contribution was this, for example. So let's remind ourselves or look at the basics of a good written submission. So you should aim to structure your statements, write them out in a clear and easy to follow way, and you can use various frameworks for that. I have a slide later on that gives into more detail what the frameworks are, and there are different ways that you can use them, but a simple Google of STAR, SHARE or CAR in terms of writing self-reflective statements will help you along the way. You should use relevant examples for each of the attributes. So whatever it is you write in your statement must directly apply and reflect the attribute that you are hoping to claim that you have demonstrated well. And your work should be linked to the chemical sciences. That broadly applies to all of the attributes, but there are particular attributes where it mentions chemistry or chemical sciences. So that's your indication there to make sure that you are bringing out the chemistry in what you're doing, and that you're not talking about your work in such a vague way that the assessors can't see that actually you are working in the chemical sciences. But what you don't need to do is write out methods, for example. We don't need to see that in your written statement. Next, we would like you to use English in your statements, and we would like the primary evidence also to be in English. You may have evidence in another language depending on where you work, and we'll accept a translation of that to understand what that primary evidence is about. But for the moment, please use English in your application. As mentioned already, write in the first person, use I instead of we when you are actually trying to draw attention to your own contribution in the example that you're giving, and emphasize your personal impact. And that's a nice way to finish the statement. So you evidence this attribute and it all worked well, and this is what the outcome was. So let's have a little stop by again on using artificial intelligence, and just building on what Mike said earlier. We do accept some use. So if you have a framework for an answer and you have some initial sentences or bullet points and you want that support from AI to help you structure it in the right way, or choose your kind of right words to make sure that you're conveying the meaning that you want to, then you can use AI in that. And we have an acceptable use policy that Mike shared earlier, and that will be on our documentation. And if you're ever in doubt, please email us at cchem@rsc.org and we can share that with you again. However, as Mike hinted at, use with caution, proceed with care. We do have our guide to ethics, which I've linked to in the digital delegate bag, in the column about information for CChem. So you can have a read of that. It's also on our website under the member regulations area. And we have a code of conduct as well. So both of those things do reference use of AI, and that should be your first port of call. If you do find yourself using it, make sure you're using it in the right way. However, using AI does not replace the benefits of forging a healthy and productive relationship with your mentor. So you can use it to help you write your statements, but you should still be discussing your statements and your evidence with your mentor. I can see Mike nodding, very good, absolutely. All the best candidates have extremely productive, positive working relationships with their CChem mentor. All the candidates that are not successful generally do not have a productive working relationship with their mentor, and they can really aid you in having a successful outcome. So it's in your best interests to still work with them, and we recommend meeting with them at least once a quarter throughout the process, so every 3 months or so, sometimes on occasion much more frequently than that, and you need to determine how much you work with your mentor. But it would be a mistake to go through the whole process never having spoken to your mentor. They are integral to your success. And last but not least, it goes without saying that if you are using AI, you must not use it to make up any statements about yourself which are not true or haven't happened, and you must not use it to fabricate any evidence. Generally, if you are going to use it, stick within the accepted use areas that we have, which is all about grammar and helping you to write your statements. If you are using AI outside of those acceptable use areas, you must declare it, but steer clear of making your statements up and making your evidence up. The best part of going through your chartership application is the development that you undergo along the way, and you don't want to miss out on that. So let's have a little look now at making a start on drawing up your statements. So we have a 2-step process. You may not wish to follow this. You may have another approach which works well for you. That's totally fine. But if this is all new to you, here's an example of how you might proceed. So we suggest looking at where your gaps are currently and conducting a kind of first pass where you look at the 14 attributes and spending not very long, maybe no more than 30 minutes, just jotting down bullet points against each of the attributes, the examples that come to mind initially. And wherever you've got gaps or you really struggle to think of what statement you might provide, that's your cue to then go back and think about that in a bit more detail. So then you'll have a second pass, spend 5 minutes, maybe more, maybe 15 or more, having a look at those gaps and thinking, can I spend a bit more time thinking about the particular example or statements that I might want to put together for it? If you really struggle with that, that is then an indication that you need to discuss that attribute with your mentor. But generally, anything that you come up with, you should discuss all your ideas with your mentor. And we've got a few more slides later on how they can help you in writing out your statements. But for a lot of members, this might be a good place to start. Keeps it short and sweet. We agree that trying to evidence 14 attributes up to a half a page each can be daunting. So the best thing to do is break it down bit by bit, and you can help work with your mentor who can help you to do that as you go along. Then you have your framework. And then once you have this initial set of kind of responses, through your discussions with your mentor, you can then work out, do you have a better one? Or over the time that you're undertaking your CChem, does a better example sort of happen, 6 months later, and you think, oh, I'd like to use that instead. And that's the first steps that you're taking in terms of that self-reflection and working out what facets of your work and facets of your professional self do you want to put forward for your chartership application. And so in terms of helping you do that self-reflection, these 14 statements really require you to have a think about how you've evidenced that attribute, what did you do and why, and it really prompts you to start thinking and exploring your own motivations and reasons for how it all unfolded. But for some of you, this might be a relatively new thing to do. You might not have needed to do this much in your professional career so far, and so the next couple of slides just have a few pointers on helping establish that self-reflective practice. So as mentioned already, you want to show your best self for your chartership application. So the self-reflection will enable you to highlight the best examples, not just any and every example. We only want the best ones. Next, the self-reflective will help self-reflection will help you take stock, and these are questions we will see later on when you're thinking about evidencing your attribute. So why do you do what you do? How do you do it? And what do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? And through discussions with your mentor, you'll really begin to unpick how you're sort of developing yourself as a professional chemical scientist. Through the self-reflection, you will begin or enhance your own development through increasing your self-awareness, and that, as our colleagues in our careers team tells us, is linked to your own career success as you go on. And then last but not least, we really want to understand your impact. So when you are undertaking this self-reflective practice by yourself or with your mentor, really think about the impacts. You achieved something. What did that mean for your work, for you, for your colleagues, for your organisation, or perhaps broadly for the chemical sciences if it's in a particular area or groundbreaking bit of work. So here are some exercises to help support your self-reflection. So you can take time to identify mistakes that you've done. The whole point of the chartership application is to get to know yourself a lot better. So that's the good bits and the bad bits. Once you've identified the mistakes, then you can look to work on them and develop them with your mentor. You can develop critical thinking and problem solving. What could you have done differently and why? It's a simple question, but one that can be really insightful. By doing the self-reflective practice, and of course compiling your application itself is a form of journaling. You can track your progress against goals, review learning, and cement concepts in your mind. Ones that come into my mind when I think about that are around ethical practice or the attribute that talks about influencing, for example. And then lastly, you can develop your self-awareness, that emotional intelligence, and get a better understanding of how you manage stress as well. You know, all these things are a part of normal working day, and you can see all these things, you know, you think about really broadly before you even come down to that more narrow statement that you eventually write. But as you are working on your chartership, you will explore all these aspects more broadly and then write and edit more finely for the final submission. So here are some questions to support that self-reflection, and I'll reference them a bit later on in the next slide, showing you how you can apply them to your CChem attributes. But key ones I want to pick out are, you know, what does a good day look like to you, and having a little think about what that means in terms of your work, and why it was a good day is always a good question. And then the last one, just to focus on what goals are you working towards. So you'll have your goals for achieving CChem, but within that, there'll be goals perhaps to evidencing or building some skills across the different attributes. And it's a key aspect of self-reflective practice is to constantly think about how far have I come? How far do I need to go? Where am I going? So all these questions are very valid and will help steer you in the right direction to meeting the CChem attributes. So lastly, just on this, some ideas for supporting self-reflection. Ask your friends, colleagues and collaborators for feedback and thoughts, and some of this can be used as evidence in your CChem application as well against some of the attributes in form of a testimonial. You can identify your own personal values and mission. Obviously work with your CChem mentor. We also have a careers mentoring program as well. So if you wanted additional support beyond or in addition to your Chartered Chemist mentor, then we have careers advisors and coaches available there. And we're very closely related, this idea of self-reflection and professional development. So it will all help enhance your application. And it's really important that you keep this open and learning mindset about yourself throughout the process, because this is the main benefit of going through the Chartered Chemist application. So you get to know yourself better, and when you do that, you can talk about yourself and sell yourself better, and hopefully find roles throughout your career that align with things like your values and missions. So let's have a little closer look at the skills involved in Chartered Chemists. I'm not going to read through all of them. You'll be able to find these in the slides afterwards. But under each main area of the chartership application, there are a number of sub-skills that you will draw on and you can reference and think about in terms of writing your statements. So you can see here there's loads of them for each different area, and I will have an example, I think maybe on the next slide or two, where we can reflect on those skills for the different chartership areas. Here we are, worked example. So we've just used the first CChem attribute A1, which is all about using knowledge and making decisions, just to show you how to think about that self-reflection and the skills on the previous few slides. So the attribute here explain how your knowledge of the chemical sciences informs your decisions and impacts on your work. Then you can have a think about the skills that you employ along the way, and then have a think about the reflection as relating to those skills. So what did you do in terms of analysing? What approach did you take in terms of evaluating? What technical skills did you use? Did you have to build them? Did you have to develop them? Did you have to go and learn them somewhere else? How did that go? And so on. So we have very straightforward attribute, underlying skills that you will use in evidencing that attribute, and then you can frame your reflection to understand exactly how you've been applying those skills. And through that, you will extract the statement for your CChem attribute. And a pointer for any development that you might want to meet missing skills, perhaps develop your own chemistry knowledge in other ways, or work to a higher level, or perhaps you want to create a higher impact. So if you work all the way through the reflective statements, but actually these bits are missing, then they're really key areas for that development to work on throughout your application. Next up, we'll just run through some pitfalls and tips before we move on to Hannah's presentation. So show, not tell. So really talk us through why you did what you did. Remember, I've already said this, statements first, evidence second. Give yourself time. You don't want to just sit there doing nothing for 12, 24 months and all of a sudden decide that you now need to write all of your 14 attributes. The self-reflection works best if you do it little bit by little bit, every week, every month, or so on. You should have early input from your mentor. So as I mentioned already, avoid not ever talking to them. Make sure that you are chatting with them regularly. You should emphasize your actions, input and contribution, but as I mentioned earlier, avoid things like giving too much detail on stuff that's not relevant to the attribute, such as giving a method, and ensure your writing is clear and easily understood. So avoid the use of jargon and acronyms and so on. And next up, we have some tips that I've sourced from across the chartership team. And one that we were given was start with the statements you find easiest. I think this is a very good tip. There are some attributes that you'll naturally think that you can evidence and write about relatively easy. So whether they're in the knowledge section or communication, such as writing reports or giving a presentation on a particular topic, or the health and safety attribute, some of these might be your best port of call to start first. And they help doing that should boost your confidence, get you off to a good start, and it gets you into the habit of good writing and reflective practice. The next tip that we have is to think about the statements like a written down job interview or Viva. So the same questions that you would think about when giving an answer in an interview apply to CChem, and they are very similar, that you can sort of mentally approach it in the same way. And then a third tip is to structure your statements. So we have 3 frameworks that you can use. So STAR, which is to frame your answers first by situation, then explain the task, what needed to be achieved, then what action you took, and the results and the impact. And that is a good approach for creating a well-rounded answer. Share is very similar, except it has hindrance and evaluation, and that might be more useful in those earlier discussions with your mentor, but they're good for self-reflection. And then the third framework is CAR. If you sometimes find that you struggle giving too much detail on the situation or the task, CAR is a good way to focus. So it's the broadly, what's the context, what is the action, and then what was the results of your action and the impact. They all do the same thing, just one of them might resonate with you a bit more better than the other ones. So last, we'll kind of end on some tips. Make sure that you have a range of examples and your statements are nice and varied. You could create a matrix using Excel to keep track, if you're using this particular situation for this attribute, how many other attributes are you using that for as well. Use our resources, another top tip from our team members. We've got loads of resources on our members area to help you. And then we'll finish with how your mentor can help you. So they are essential to your success. First off, they can talk through your examples with you, and that discussion is really important to help draw out the necessary detail. That they can discuss the reflection points, what skills did you use, how and why, and so on. And then your mentor gives you different perspective on what you did, and that is a benefit, seeing things from their point of view as well. And other ways that your mentor can help you in your statement writing, talking through your statement, verbalizing it is actually really good for your own understanding and theirs. You can also work with your mentor to help you understand the particular meanings of words in an attribute and make sure that you're conveying the right things, such as what does ethical practice mean for you in your role. And as I've mentioned already, your mentor can help you explore widely, but then also help you edit more finely. So I think working with a mentor is probably better than working with AI to edit your work, because it still has to tell your story at the end of it. So you can use them to help you there. And then lastly, the support that we have available is broad. We have lots of guidance online on our main webpage, in the members area when you are thinking about CChem or you are a CChem applicant, and we've got lots of examples from different sectors within there, and various other resources, videos and other sorts of webinars. We also offer one-to-one consultations with the team, so you can sign up for those, look out for them in member newsletters, for example, and that is your time to discuss ideas or things you're struggling with. We also offer our CChem Cafe events, which provide peer-to-peer support. We offer email support with the chartership team, so if you have a query, send it in and we'll be able to respond to you. We also can conduct pre-submission reviews as well if you needed that extra reassurance. And we can also help you identify a suitable mentor from within your own networks or offer support if not. So we will move on now to hear about the experiences from Hannah, a recent CChem member who's got some really good approaches that she's taken. So welcome, Hannah, and yeah, do tell us about your experiences for Chartered Chemist.
Okay, hello, so I'm Hannah. I graduated from the University of Bath. My degree was actually in natural sciences, but I did a lot of chemistry in my final year, including a chemistry project. But one of the appeals of becoming a chartered chemist was to get that recognition that I do a lot of chemistry within my job. I remember when I first heard about Chartered Chemist that we were doing a step challenge at work and we were going to go for a lunchtime walk. And one of our members said, "Oh, I can't come because I'm watching a webinar, a bit like this, about Chartered Chemist." And I remember thinking, oh, that sounds really impressive. And I had a little bit of a look at it then. And it is quite a lot to do and seemed slightly daunting. But then coincidentally, a few months later, actually, my manager at work recommended that actually I look at becoming a chartered chemist. It would help with my career progression and also just to get recognition of that expertise within chemistry and everything. So I did apply and I did my application. And then, as you can see there, last year I did become a chartered chemist. And this is that was a picture of me with my son, just doing one of the attributes, but I'll come back to that later. Okay. So when I started to look at it seriously, I found the RSC guidance for CChem was really helpful. It's just got more information about what exactly they're looking for each of those attributes. The other thing I did was find a mentor. I talked to people in the company I work at, and I was really lucky in that someone I work quite closely with turned out to be a chartered chemist, and she was willing to be my mentor. And as Nelly said, she was really key to my success in my application. She was able to support me throughout it. We had regular catch-ups, at least fortnightly. She was able to help me to find examples as well. But once I knew what the attributes were, I did have a bit of a dig around. As Nelly said, you will just think of some examples. As soon as you read the attributes, some things will come to mind straight away. Some things do take a bit more looking into. Just looking through meeting minutes at some of the work that I've done. We have an electronic workbook system, so I was able to find the work that I've done. And so I had some examples for most of the attributes, but then there were a few gaps. And it was really thinking as well, again, in conjunction with the mentor, about how to fill those gaps. And so there were some things like the last attribute, the supporting the profession, which was when I did some additional work for that I'll come back to in a later slide. Also, before I put in my application, one of the things I did was I arranged one of those consultations with a accreditation and chartered specialist. And I find that such a helpful and invaluable experience because I could ask about the specific questions that I had. And also, and the person I had, the specialist I talked to, did agree to review my statements before I submitted them. So it was good to just get that feedback, to know that I was on the right track, that my examples were strong enough before I submitted my application. So that was a really useful service, and I would definitely recommend that as well. And then the other thing just to think about is sort of the time frame. And to make sure that you're putting enough time into it, and to think, because obviously all your examples need to be over a 2-year period. So you need to think about when you'd like to submit and which kind of examples you can use from the past. So when it came to sort of drafting my statements, I would take one attribute at a time and really just try and do all the examples for that attribute in one go. I was passing those onto the consultant, the RSC consultant. She was reviewing them for me, and also my mentor was reviewing them to me as I wrote them, and she was writing her supporting statements as well, which was really useful. And the other thing was I was sort of collecting my evidence just into a folder at the same time, so that when it would come to putting that evidence pack together in the future, that would all be gathered together. I work in the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over 15 years, but we do need to be confidential. There were things that I couldn't share. So it's just thinking about ways to get around that. So for example, where I'm talking about chromatography, I might just refer to the most polar analyte rather than using any names. I did some work controlling humidity with saturated salt solutions, and I would just talk about that and not particularly why a specific molecule needs that humidity, just, you know, the general science and how that applies. For the challenges, I think one of the things that's quite challenging is that you do need to be quite vulnerable. Obviously, you're sharing it with your mentor. My mentor is someone that I worked with, but she was really supportive, and that was really good. And I think the other thing is there are some attributes where it's quite easy. You can think of lots of examples, and writing the statement comes quite easily. But for other examples, for me particularly, I've found trying to think how to write the one for the code of conduct quite challenging. And again, my mentor there was just so helpful. She gave me suggestions. She had actually done her CChem about a decade ago, so it was quite different when she did it. The statements weren't quite so long. It was quite based on a big statement at the end, as opposed to long statements for each of the attributes. But she was still really helpful. She read through the same guidance as me, and we were able to talk through what might be required. And so that was really helpful. And I think that's that slide. And then this was just some examples from the last attribute, the active member of the scientific community. This was sort of something where I had a little bit of a gap. So I had been going into my son's school and helping with some lessons, and this is a photo from a lesson we did about melting, where all the children just were holding chocolate, and it was very messy. And I think you can see from his face that he was really enjoying that. But then another thing I did specifically for my Chartered Chemist, and was probably the most fun thing, was the Beaver group I helped with. I led the experiment badge. So we did a bit of chromatography there with the colours. We did these colour wheels, and then we made this papier-mâché volcano that was on that first slide, and then we mixed the vinegar and the bicarbonate of soda. So that was a lot of fun as well.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing your reflections, Hannah. Dare I ask, did you enjoy going through the process overall?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was really nice to reflect, and I think it's actually a really nice record now to have. I've still got obviously my submissions because they're electronic, to be able to see all that work and just the diversity and the breadth of the work that I did over that sort of 2-year period. But yeah, this was definitely the most fun.
It looks it. It looks it. And that is something we do recommend our chartership candidates do, is keep a hold of their submission and look at it 6 months or 12 months from when they are hopefully awarded it, and reflect again, perhaps not as long though, on how they've developed since that moment in time. It's a really good snapshot to create of where you are professionally, and you don't forget all that hard work there. I've got a couple of questions to ask both Hannah and Mike. So Mike, coming back to you, we've just heard from Hannah how her mentor was very supportive in terms of helping her achieve Chartered Chemist status. Have you got any thoughts or perspectives on where you've seen a mentor really help the CChem candidate?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is not all mentors are made equal. You have some mentors that are very proactive, and they will give you a nudge if you've not been in touch with them for a while and say what you're up to. They tend to be few and far between, if I'm honest. What you tend to find is they need reminding because generally they're busy and so on. So as the candidate, it's in your interest to make best use of your mentor. So get those meetings in the diary, have those chats, make sure they've agreed to be your mentor, make best use of them. They do have experience, and they will be looking quite often at what you've written or what you're doing with a fresh set of eyes. So it's really valuable to have that kind of input from somebody that's if not independent, has a different view of the world. So I'm a big advocate for the use of mentors. I think they're really useful in all walks of life, but particularly for this, I think they can be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And so back to you, Hannah, can you share with us some thoughts on how you went about identifying your own mentor to work with? So they obviously proved quite pivotal to your success. So how did you find them?
I suppose, well, initially I actually was talking to somebody else in my workplace who's a fellow of the Society of Chemistry, and they weren't sure whether they would have the time to actually commit to being my mentor, because it does take a significant chunk of their time, to write the supporting statements for each of the attributes. And then, so I was really fortunate in that once I was looking into doing it, I was talking to people in work about it, and one of my colleagues just mentioned that she was a chartered chemist. And so straight away I said to her, would you consider being my mentor? She was someone I had worked closely with. I knew that she was a diligent individual, and I was, and she agreed. So that was really lovely. It was good. She was able to come up with some example, she was able to help me as well to identify the examples because she had worked so closely with me as well. She was able to suggest things that I had done. She said, oh, do you remember, you did this? That would be good, a good example to include for this attribute. So it was good.
And I think both comments there really highlighting the important role of the mentor. But interesting that you said, Hannah, that they hadn't mentored for CChem before, and I think that's not a barrier. So if you are thinking about engaging with Chartered Chemists and you have spotted someone that you work with and you think, yes, they would be excellent, they don't necessarily have to have mentored lots of people before you. They'll bring, as Mike said, a range of experiences and that fresh set of eyes that will be also valuable in putting your application together. And again, if you want our help in identifying who to approach, then you can contact us and we can share some pointers. Incidentally, we also have a link to our CChem ideas pack in the digital delegate bag, and there's a few pages there about finding an ideal mentor or being the ideal mentee, because as Mike said, it is a two-horse race there, and you're both involved. So it's on you to be a good candidate and a good mentee to get the best out of that relationship as well. You can enter more questions in the chat and we'll pose them to the speakers as we go along, and you can also put things in the Q&A as well. Before we get on to the Q&A question, I have just two more questions for both of our speakers. One for you, Mike. Let me bring the question. What advice would you give to a CChem candidate to ensure that they provide enough detail in their statements?
So in terms of getting enough detail in there in their statements, I'm going to go back to re-emphasize what I said in my introductory words, which is think about what the question's asking and make sure that you're answering the question. And actually, you can do that in a surprisingly small number of words. It's I tend to say it's about quality, not quantity, when it comes to answering these questions. So address the question and ensure that you're giving evidence that is relevant and has that depth that I talked about as well. So it may be one meaty piece of evidence, or it might be several smaller pieces of evidence. But again, use your mentor to if you're not sure, speak to them, see how they feel about it. That's the point in having a mentor. So I think that's what that's the guidance I give.
Yeah, very good guidance. Quality over quantity. I feel like we should get those printed, words printed on a t-shirt, hand them out. Absolutely. And one of the attributes is around clear communication, and writing your statements are in and of themselves an example of that. So you don't want to undermine what you're trying to say there about how wonderful you can communicate if you are putting forward lots of sentences and words that are not perhaps so relevant to how you have evidenced the attribute. So be ruthless with yourself and make every word fight for its right to be included in your statement. Just to end on that. And Hannah, one last question for you. Is there anything that you would do differently if you were going through this process again? Hard question.
Yeah, I think I was really lucky because, as I said, I had a really good mentor, and I was really glad that I did that consultation right at the beginning, and I would definitely recommend that to anyone. I think just getting that support from the specialists is invaluable. So I think, yeah, I was lucky with that.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Yeah.
Well, I think I didn't attend events like, oh, sorry, I didn't attend events like this, and I think maybe that was the one thing that I maybe missed, and it would have been good. I think it's been a lot of really useful information shared today.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Thank you. Glad to hear it. And I guess for everyone listening in, you're already on a head start there because you've turned up today. So thank you for that, Hannah, and thank you, Mike. We'll just have a couple of questions before we close the session. So one question in the Q&A is, how many years of scientific experience should be included in the documentation for a CChem application? So the comment there is, as Hannah said, to draw from your examples and what has happened within the last 2 years at the point of submission. And the idea is that the chartership application is reflective of how you currently work. So although it might be great, we don't need to know about what you did 10 years ago. Keep those examples contemporary from within the last 2 years. So we had another question also in the Q&A asking, are we expected to source mentors ourselves, or if mentors will be assigned as part of the programme? So generally the advice is that you will identify, like Hannah did, your own mentor. We do have help and guidance on our websites. Look in that digital delegate bag at the idea sheets for how to go around picking your own mentor. But generally, we ask candidates to identify their own mentor because you know your work best, you know yourself best, and often the best mentors are from within your workplace because they will have a good idea of what you're working on. They are probably aware of what can and can't be shared, whereas if you were being mentored by someone outside your organisation, you might be prohibited there with some of your confidentiality restrictions. And there's also that idea of speaking a common language with someone from your own place of work, and they may also be perhaps more aware of opportunities for development than someone outside of your organisation. But if anyone is struggling, we do encourage you to get in touch with us via email at cchem@rsc.org, and we can help you from there. On occasion, we do pair people with mentors who are external to their organisation, where someone needs it, but usually we're able to help the candidates identify the best candidate for their mentor from within their existing networks. Referring to my colleague Kim, are there any other questions that we've left unanswered? Can you spot either in the chat or the Q&A that you want to touch on, or is there any? I can see that you've been furiously answering everyone's questions in the Q&A. Is there anything you want to draw on before we draw this session to a close?
I think you've answered most of them in your talk. We had quite a few questions about mentors. We had a question about confidentiality, and we had a couple of questions about testimonials. But I think you covered quite a lot of it in your talk anyway. We do have a question about the UK talent visa. We don't deal with those visas, so I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So over to you, Mike, for some final thoughts and comments before we end today's session. It's been really good. Thank you, everyone, for putting all your questions in the chat there and for following along as we've been chatting. Mike, any last words?
Yeah, thanks, Nellie. I think the first thing is to say that in some ways we're probably preaching to the converted, because the people that have made the effort to dial in here are obviously proactive and wanting to pursue this. So well done to everybody for making the effort to join us today. I hope that it's been useful to you and that you've got something out of it. So go for it. I'd like to thank Nellie and Hannah for their contributions. Nellie for hosting. It's really good for Hannah to give that insight to being just the other side of the fence. It's been a few years since I did mine. But in particular, I'd like to say thanks to Kim. I think she's probably been the hardest working of all of us here. I've been watching the answers come through in the chat to all the questions. So yeah, that's been great. And just to remind everyone of what Nellie said right at the beginning, that there are another couple of sessions coming up. There's a second one on how to evidence your CChem attributes, so in your portfolio, and another one on using the RSC for your development during CChem, but also getting involved beyond that through local sections, through boards and journals and things like that. There's loads of stuff to do, and like so many things, you know, you get out of it what you put into it, and certainly that's been my experience with the RSC. So thank you, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you. And I believe that once we end the call, if you have the Teams app that you've been watching this through, the chat will stay open, I think. So if we haven't managed to answer your questions, do check on there. We'll just keep answering them over the next few minutes if we haven't already answered them. But I think we have answered any. If you have any unanswered questions, I really do encourage you to put them in the Q&A column in the digital delegate bag. You've got that link that's going to stick around for quite a while, so we can respond to any additional questions on there. And of course, you can always reach out to us at cchem@rsc.org. Thank you once again, Mike and Hannah, and to my colleagues Kim and Louise for helping me deliver this event. And good luck, everyone, with your applications. You can find all the information about CChem on our main website. in the bit around CChem with links on how to apply. So if you aren't already an applicant, you can go via that way. But do look out for the recordings. We'll be posting these in our members area probably towards the middle of October once we've finished the session. But the recording for this one might be available imminently in the chat for the teams if you are using the app. Thank you very much. I will end the event now, but if you have any further questions, please do email us. And thank you all for your questions and responses as we've been going along. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.